Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to take this time to honor our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things I, Primus Ken, know is very expensive, and that is their time. And so I want to honor Kat for coming and sharing some of this precious commodity with us because once spent, it's spent. And she has chosen to be here to spend it with us, and we want to honor her. The other is the journey. And again, that is the ability to allow us to get to know her, to see who she is from a perspective that is about tears, pain, all of those things, joy and victory. And so we want to honor her that she's allowing us the opportunity to experience that. Why? So that we can become better human spirits. She got a couple of things from that journey, if you will, that we want access to. Her wisdom, her knowledge, and her insight so that we can change our being and change the world. Kat, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Well, thank you, Ken. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am too. One of the first questions that I usually level to our guests is first, so you can introduce yourself. And second, I want you to, because I talked about the journeys and that last part of our journey, which is a continual one, both of them are, is the ability to serve. Kat, how do you serve mankind?
Wow. Well, first off, I would say the best way that I serve is by living my legacy, which, not leaving it someday, but actually living it here and now in the way that I engage with myself and with other people on my path. And, I have been very fortunate in my life early on to be able to see some things that were limiting who I was at that time. And then because of those experiences, be able to help others who are on their transformational journey and perhaps they haven't seen who they really are yet. And
That is
having
awesome.
an opportunity to help them see new possibilities in their life, to see who they really are, to embrace who they really are unapologetically, wholeheartedly, and discover, their own legacy and
Yeah.
how they're going to live that out today, not someday.
I love it. I think one of our, the purpose of us coming here, Kat, or the journey is designed to help us to remember who we are. And as we go inside and excavate all of the crazy stuff that we put in there, because we put it in there, when we start taking them out, we see this beautiful, beautiful individual that has been covered with much of our madness, which is basically some of those dark belief systems that we have. I like going back, Kat, to the beginnings of our beginnings, if you will. I tell people we visit spaces in life, and one of our very first is the family unit. We have this group of strangers, basically, mom and dad, and you and I, and brothers and sisters, whatever. We are going to learn a couple of things there. We're going to learn communication skills. We're going to learn about how we think and behave, how we deal with ourselves, how we deal with others, and so forth. What was your family like?
Oh my gosh. That's kind of filled with a lot of trauma for me. But I would say what I learned early on from my family is that I would never be good enough. And it was reinforced in so many different ways. And that label, if you will, never good enough, really impacted me in so many ways, limited me in so many ways until I had, an opportunity to discover that that wasn't really true.
Yeah.
But it took me leaving home at an early age to be able to get a picture, and I woke up this morning, Ken, and I don't know about you, but sometimes, just wake up with a really strong thought. And that for me today was, what will it be like when we are all living beyond the labels that have attached themselves to us? And what will it be like when we can let go of those labels, the things that we've either labeled ourselves, our family has labeled us, our friends, our family, God forbid, the media, there's so many labels out there right now that are so limiting and toxic. And I'm just feeling more and more like part of my journey, part of my legacy is really taking those on,
Yeah.
and helping people see them in the first place, heighten their awareness that they even have them,
Yeah.
that they're living constrained by them, and then to help them kind of peel those away and see what's truly there.
Yeah. And with those that have been through their journey, I know many people that don't like the journey because they're afraid to look at self. But those limiting programs that Kat has talked about, all of us have it. And we usually gain much of those within the family unit that we weren't good enough. And as a result, we have to figure out a way how to manage ourselves. And so we create stories because mom and dad or whoever's giving us this story. And so we have to create another story within ourselves, the young individual, to help us to cope with the other story that mom and dad. So we find ourselves in a survival mode and we create whatever story to pass through. Go ahead, Kat.
I'm just going to say, when you talk about childhood, I kind of forgot the main thing, which was overlays everything, which was I was born in a secret city. And that secrecy factor kind of also contributed to me being able to discover who am I really, to be being brought up in an atmosphere of secrecy. There was no ability to really share honestly. Everything was so buttoned up. And so it's taken me many years, and I still work on it in terms of being real, who I really am, and trusting myself and trusting others that I can be honest, that I can share, what's really on my heart. And so coupling that kind of secrecy factor with the I'm not good enough factor, was a heavy influence early on that I have, through my transformational journey, continued to peel back.
That's the journey, and that's going to happen until we die. I don't think we will ever know all of it. I think we will continually grow. I believe also, Kat, that while we were in the womb, we were being programmed. You are hearing conversations from those that, even though it was a secret, this soul was in that body, getting data and hearing and listening to those conversations. And I think the program starts there. And that some of those programs are a little more difficult to detect.
Yeah.
But as we continue to dig and dig and dig through, someone will say something and we respond and we're like, what is that? Where is that from? And then we have to go and find out where that was from. And so as we dig more and more, that's why I think we will never, ever finish, because I think the programming started way before we even came out. And so here you are. You said you didn't start expanding yourself until you left. When you left, where did you go and what was the incident that said, okay, enough, I'm out of here?
Well, like I said, I was very fortunate early on at the age of 14. A friend took me to an Up With People performance. Now, a lot of your listeners might go, what is that? And Up With People is way more than just a show. It's actually kind of like a full immersion leadership program on the road 24/7. College students travel the world performing, and they stay with host families wherever they go. And the whole mission is to build bridges of understanding, to prepare these young people to become lifelong learners and lifelong change makers. And when I saw this show, I was like, this is my ticket out. Now, I was only 14. These were college students, but I was like, this is my dream. Somehow, someday, some way, I am going to leave home and hit the road Up With People. And 2 years later, I did that. So they started a high school cast. I was able to, through some amazing situations, be able to take advantage of that. I applied, My parents were like, yeah, go ahead, apply. But when I got accepted, they were like, well, you can't do that. You're not leaving home. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And they're like, well, we're not going to pay for it. And so one of my fun stories is that I was so committed to that dream that I picked up the phone. I called NBC Studios and I asked to talk to Bob. Now, I was asking to speak to Bob Hope, who was, a major entertainer,
Yeah.
in his time, right? And Providence took over. He was there. They put him on the phone, shared my passion for this opportunity. And he was like, where do I send the check? And he paid for my first year on the road. And that experience, those experiences of traveling with 100 students, 15 staff, very diverse, staying with host families from the most impoverished to the most wealthy, and everything in between really gave me a different sense of who I was in the midst of all this. And early on, they gave me the chance to go ahead of the cast to help find the host families and work with sponsors and whatnot, which for a 16-year-old was a big responsibility.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing ever because that is when I realized that I was capable,
Yeah.
that never good enough label, was just a story, was a lie. And, over that year, and I actually stayed a second year, I got to know myself and how I fit into the world and what I was capable of. And it just really gave me a passion that when I left, I wanted to pay that forward with other young people. And so throughout my early career, I did a lot of things to create opportunities for young people to discover who they were,
Yeah.
to get rid of their labels, their limitations,
Mhm.
see their capabilities, and, just give them a space to figure that out.
That is awesome. I love that story. Bob happens to be one of my favorite actors anyway. And I constantly, I go back and I have my time where I love watching his movies and stuff like that. I just adore him. And, I watched his movies all the time.
Yeah.
That's
He was quite
awesome. Yeah, it's a great story. Here's this young individual, secrecy, as they say, you're in secrecy. Everything about it is that. And she has a desire. She made her decision. She saw something. And I tell people, there are parts of you that the subconscious mind that psychologists will say, and then religion will call that individual the soul of man. And when that subconscious mind makes a decision, because he does make decisions, and usually it is out of a traumatic situation, then that individual is going to say something. And it's usually internal, some cases, and sometimes they'll express it, but they express it. And they say, I'm going to do this. And when that individual does make the decision, that's how one thinks. And what happens is that because it's the energetic expression of what is said, things begin to happen behind the scenes that individual doesn't know of. People say the universe, others will say God, I say God, will begin to make that a reality. And it takes years, sometimes faster, but it will come to pass. And there is always opposition, and it's supposed to be that, because I think the opposition comes, Kat, to see if we really want it. We make the declaration. Yeah, but if we really want it, we are going to make it happen. Nothing stands in our way to make it happen. And what your parents said this, you said, no, there's another way. And you found that way. And that's manifestation. It's not this pie in the sky where you just dream it up and then it pops up. No, it takes some work, takes some discipline. It takes some courage to get there. You got there, you were exposed, you saw the different families, you saw all the different mindsets as you are moving from family to family. You saw you as you are exploring the world and other folks. As you were doing that, and you said you began to grow and see things about you and accept. Talk to us about some of those things that you saw specifically, because again, secrecy and the fact that they're saying that story that they're telling you. What did you begin to notice about you, and what did you love about it?
Well, I guess in the big picture, what I noticed is I was constantly at 16 and 17 being put in situations that most people would say was impossible, let alone for a 16-year-old. Being sent ahead of the cast with very little supervision or direction and being tasked with finding host families for 115 people and working with promoters, for the show. And some of that was really fun and some of it was really difficult. I mean, failure was not an option. These people were going to show up. And if I didn't produce, it wasn't going to happen. And somehow, some way, I just had this mindset that I'd figure it out. And I did, against all odds at times. And I think that has been such a fundamental learning for me that, I often say, what if impossible is just a story you're telling yourself? And to your point, once you make a decision that you're going to figure it out, things do just, I say, magically or providentially happen to make that possible. And it has allowed me throughout my life to take on many seemingly impossible things and very successfully. And so that's a core thing that I work with other individuals on is how do you make the shift from impossible to possible? And I have found like there's kind of two questions that help me and help others make that transformation. And it starts with saying, once you're thinking of, oh my God, this is impossible. I want to do this so bad, but it just feels impossible. And the first question is, what if it is possible? Closely followed by, what am I not seeing yet? And that word yet is so powerful. You said sometimes it takes a while for things to manifest and other times it just happens. And for me, the most recent example of that was when COVID hit and everything came to a halt. And it wasn't until things came to a halt that I realized I was completely burned out. I didn't want to keep doing what I've been doing, but making a shift, a significant shift in the middle of a pandemic seemed impossible. And I thought, what if it is possible? What am I not seeing yet? And I'm telling you, the next day, I saw this article about a woman who had retired in Mexico on her fixed income. And I was like, what? Mexico? I don't know about that. Fixed income? Really? There's no way in Los Angeles you could live on your fixed income, which is what was going to have to happen for me to make a significant shift in what
Yeah.
I wanted to do. It was just like that led to me doing further research on Mexico, creating like a wish list, if you will, of everything I wanted my life to look like from have to have to, oh my God, that would be awesome to have. And it didn't take long for me to find Lake Chapala, Mexico, and it checked every single box. We made a decision without ever being there to move to a foreign country in the middle of the pandemic and did it in 3 months.
Wow.
Sold our house, our cars, our boat, our furniture, everything. Packed 8 suitcases and our golden retriever and got on a plane and moved to Mexico. And I mean, that's a radical example and it's very true.
Yeah.
And we've been here 3 years and, we have no regrets. It's been very challenging, but making that decision and then committing wholeheartedly to and doing whatever it took to build the capacity to do it, figure it out. It was like my ultimate example of doing the seemingly impossible. And it has just been such a blessing because it's allowed me to do so many things that I never would have been able to do had we not made that decision.
Yeah, sometimes it takes courage to pursue your dreams and what you want and to manifest what you want, because we kind of get displaced with life and circumstances and so forth. But once you lock in and you do the data, the research, and that's what I tell people, when that individual inside makes the decision, acquiring the data becomes like this joy. And you dig, and it's just like this, just like a playground. I want to say it becomes like a playground, and it's not tedious. And you're there all day long, just grabbing data, and you're just drinking it up because this individual inside wants this thing to manifest. And I'm telling you, you call Bob Hope of all people. How in the world did some kid call up this station? And why in the world would you even think of Bob Hope to do that? And so all things are possible, Jesus said, to him who believes. So if there's this part, the first part of that statement, all things are possible, then all things are possible. And then the next thing he says, but it's based on your belief. So then you and I are responsible for that part. We can't do the other part, but we are responsible for the belief part. And so then we have no excuse as to becoming a disciple. A disciple means that you are disciplined in what you're pursuing to get that knowledge so that you can get this impossible stuff to be possible. And Kat laid it out.
Putting judgment aside and
Everything.
embracing insatiable curiosity.
Yeah.
And that's when the fun part starts. You know, we get really curious. We put those judgments aside, you know, and sometimes, you know, I know, like, I'll ask people, you know, like, what is it that you really want? What's tugging at your heart? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And invariably, what I hear 90% of the time is, yeah, but Kat, you don't know my situation. And I'm like, just put that aside. Just put it aside for a few minutes and just sit with, what is it that you really want? And it's just amazing and heartbreaking at times how difficult it can be to give ourselves permission to believe.
Yeah. The program.
You know, we're going into the unknown, and that's where doubts creep in and second guessing ourselves, unless and until we're willing to set those aside long enough to even say what we really want. Because again, for me, it was like secret, that whole secrecy thing. But once, you know, you like give yourself permission to get real, that's when the good stuff starts to happen. And we start to see what's possible. And once we make that decision, draw that line in the sand, make a hell yes commitment, as I say, that is when things open up. And it isn't until we take that first step of belief and then the next step of what's the first thing I can do to move in that direction. And it's just amazing how the first step is always the most challenging. And yet, once we take it, the next step is easier. We gain more confidence. We see more with more clarity. We get more committed. And it starts with that first step.
Yeah. We activate laws. We activate the law of momentum when one begins. So, you know, I talk about putting aside those judgments. Those judgments are all the limitations that you have, all the programmings that people told you this and that, and you believe it. And because you believe it, you know, that's your problem because you believe it. And so the statement was that to him who believes, so then we have to work on the belief system. And that is mainly our problem, is what we believe. And so as you were moving through life, you made this decision, Kat, and I made a similar decision as that. I'm in Thailand. I had a friend of mine. I moved there several years ago, and I was talking to her about it, and she said, "You've always talked about Thailand," and I was like, "Really?" I couldn't remember the conversations and stuff. And she says, "All the time you used to talk about it, and we used to look at you like if you're nuts, and here you are living there." When she brought that to my memory, and I started thinking back about that, some of that started to come back up at some of the conversation, but it's that inner man. This is what I've learned because we're on this journey. And I grew up in the church and I study all kinds of the Vedas, I Ching. I study a lot of the books from even before the Bible and all of these different things. The Vedas is much older than the Bible. But the principles that there's a story in there, and this is what I want the listeners to get, and this is what Kat and I talking about. This woman with the issue of blood, she's spending, a rich woman, she's spending her money to get healed. You know, she believed in the hospital and the Medicaid and whatever. She's rich. She is a believer. She had her faith in the system, the healthcare system at the time. And so she spent all her money and she got broke and she's about to die. And she said she heard the story that this man, Jesus, heals. And she said, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, I'm going to get it. The scripture says that she said within herself, again, back into this we call the subconscious being or the soul of the man. She said within herself, okay, if I can touch the hem of his garment. So she made a decision inside, and then she took the appropriate steps to get there. And the Bible tells us that she was pushing against the crowd to get there. Some resistance was there. So she's pushing. She didn't want to talk to Jesus. She didn't want to say hi. She didn't want to say hallelujah. She didn't care about none of that. Her goal was what she declared, the hem. And she touched it. And he said, who touched me? And the disciples looked at him and said, what's wrong with you, dude? Everybody is touching you. And Jesus said, no, who touched me? So you and I can only touch God through that same process. The soul of the man, Kat, is telling her stories about her inner being, making these decisions and going against the resistance to get what she wants. And she is touching God. And things are behind the scene working on her side. Because when that woman touched Jesus Christ, there's stuff that started working in her body, and she's like, boom, 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 getting what she wants. And he turned around and says, go thy way, your faith made you whole. So it's back to the faith is back to the belief system, Kat. And so that's where we have the thing. And you're dealing with people and their belief. You're telling them, you're asking some of the most important, or the two of the most powerful questions. And I love that little phrase that you have, yet. Where did you get that from? Those two questions.
I think out of all my experiences that once I made the move to Mexico, I finally had time to stop and reflect deeply on what were the things that helped me make that shift from impossible to possible, from doubt to do. You know, looking at all of those experiences and finding the common threads. And one of them was that I realized that whenever I approached something that everyone said, oh, come on, Kat, no way, that's impossible, that my knee-jerk reaction became just out of habit. Well, what if it is possible? I mean, to me, it just seemed like the logical thing to do, based on, evidence from my life, that nothing was impossible unless I believed it was impossible, right?
Yeah.
So that knee-jerk reaction of, well, what if it is possible? What if Mexico is safe? What if Mexico is, all of the, just kind of like pushing back. Upward People did help me become that change maker, rebel with a cause, to just constantly push back against that resistance to say, what if, and not what if it won't work, but what if it will work? What if it's going to be amazing? And, I would hear, well, yeah, but, and my knee-jerk reaction was, yeah, but, I might not know how to do it yet, but I'll figure it out. And so, again, I think those two questions just became almost like a mantra or a natural pushback to any resistance and disruption. And one thing that I've learned over time is that disruption's my best friend.
Yeah.
Resistance is my best friend. Because it's in those moments that I decide, if I'm going to back off, or I can declare it is possible. I am going to figure it out. I may not know how to do it yet, but I will figure it out. And I think that does go back to those 2 years on the road with Upward People, being constantly tasked with things and having to figure it out. And nobody was there to tell me how to do it. I became the ultimate resource choreographer. Just figure it out.
Yeah. Isn't it wonderful when we are tasked like that? I think when we get desperate, when we come to the end of our road, if you will, And that end of our road is the end of our ability to, because we are a creature that will do whatever. Like this woman, she spent all her money. She just kept going, kept going, kept going. But she didn't get desperate because she wasn't there yet, because she still had the money. And then when the money ran out and she had nothing, and she saw there's some clarity when we've come to the end of our rope, if you will, or a road. And so some people I think they are not there yet. And when they get to the end, like you were there and you're looking at COVID hit and you're looking at it, your retirement and going, whoa, 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 wait a minute. And then that's when I think most adults began to act. Because until then, we're still trying to figure out a way that yet is in part of us, but we've never used it like how you are now asking them to use it. Wait a minute, that's not, you don't have it yet. They're doing it, but they're not doing it for how you're telling them. And that's powerful. God, I love what you're doing and how you're doing it and making people come to that hell yeah part, because they've come to the place where there's nothing left. Why not hell yeah, and then began to embark on the process. So here you are. You are learned so much, Kat. You have all these people coming. Your foundation of Kat, your foundation itself was based on doing the impossible. So you've been trained. As people come into your space, and you've seen hundreds of them, give me an example outside of you, because you are the first client, and outside of you, meaning some other folks that have come to you in that place where they are at their desperation, but they haven't been able or given the permission to say, hell yeah. Talk to me about some of those encounters, if you will.
Well, I want to go back to a situation where, again, I came out of up with people wanting to make a difference, wanting to help young people see their potential.
Yeah.
And to let go of the limitations. And I tried doing that in the corporate world. And as a change maker, that did not go over.
That don't work.
Okay. So I made the decision, okay, I think I'm going to make a shift from the corporate world to the nonprofit world. And I went to work. My first venture into that was with a residential treatment center for teenage girls who were labeled at risk. And I was captivated by their vision to give these girls a second chance, to give them an opportunity to change their life. But I'll tell you, I learned early on, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't a second chance. This is a first chance. Because how can you make a choice when you've only known one thing? So it was like, these girls were in a very traditional clinical model, counseling and whatnot. And it was clear to me, man, this is not working. These girls have got them wrapped around their little fingers. What we really need to do is get these girls out in the community doing meaningful work. And my boss looked at me and said, you're either on something or on to something. Which is it? And I'm like, hey, if we keep doing what you've been doing, they're going to keep running away. They're going to be coming back, revolving door. Let's try something different. And he's like, seems impossible. And I'm like, but what if it is possible? And he says, well, if you can actually get enough nonprofit leaders to be willing to take them on, knowing they're at risk, I'll support you. And I was so passionate about this that I got 20 nonprofit leaders to say yes.
Wow.
And we started this volunteer program. And, the girls were, when you would see them, they were like, they wouldn't look you in the eye. Their shoulders were slumped. They just looked and felt powerless. When they went out in the community and started volunteering, their whole persona changed. They discovered that they matter to somebody and somebody matters to them, and that they were actually capable of making a difference, not just in their own life, but in the lives of the people that they were serving. The transformation in these girls was just phenomenal. And there's so many stories of these girls who came in powerless and at risk, and, who completely changed their lives and went on to do really meaningful things in their lives. to me, this was like my opportunity to pay it forward and to see, and then it helped me see yet again that when I believe in other people's capabilities and give them hope, give them the means to discover more of who they are, that, it not only helped them, but it helped me grow
Mm-hmm.
in realizing just how capable I am of making a difference when I dare to
Yeah.
say hell yes. And even if I don't know how yet, because everything that I've done without knowing how I was going to do it. I didn't, it's like one of my favorite parts of the Bible is in Joshua, and it says, that God will be with you everywhere you put your foot.
Mhm.
Doesn't say, I'm going to tell you beforehand what's going to happen, but it's like once you step out in faith, you make that first step. I will be with you always.
Mhm.
I'll have your back, I'll help you figure it out. And I've just seen that time and time again in my life. And every time I do something like that, it just makes me all the more committed
That is,
because I see the evidence of that belief and the power of that belief.
yeah, walking by faith changes things, and so people are doing it all day long. They don't know that they're moving by faith. You have faith to sit in your chair,
Yeah.
drive your car. Everything is done by faith. It's a law. The Bible says faith is a law. So here you are, Kat. You've done much because again, I've been listening to your stuff and reading and grabbing stuff. And I was so impressed. And there was a degree of joy as I was reading all of your work and what you have accomplished. And I wanted to tap that for some of those that are listening to us. Here is this individual, and you talk about it. I know you have, and you talked about the effect on the girls and stuff. But I want you to talk about, here we are, it's 2025. The world there's some madness going on the outside of us,
You think?
from our walls, if you will. And people are concerned, they're pained, they're all over the place. I want you to talk to that group of people that are out there that are listening to us. From your experience that you have in this life, what is your advice to us at this point in time as you are here with me and there's a bunch of those girls, if you will, are in front of us? What is your advice?
Well, first and foremost, I'm the Post-it note queen. Okay. I
I
have
see it
this.
in the back.
Yeah, it's probably backwards that you're seeing, but it says breathe. So there is so much chaos going on in the world right now that first and foremost, like if you're caught up in that, take a breath, stop, pause, stop. And number one, I refuse to engage with all that chaos in terms of, scrolling on my phone and looking at every little thing that's, going on, crazy world, and breathe and refocus on in this moment in time. What is the most important thing to you? What's really important? What is something that maybe has been tugging at your heart that you've ignored or been afraid to look at, and revisit it and start focusing on what is it that you want to create in the world today by how you show up, by who you are and the choices that you make every day. Because I am more and more convinced that we are all living our legacy every moment of every day, choice by choice. And if we look at and we say, if somebody were to reflect back to me what I did today, would that reflect who I really believe I am or want to be? And if it's not, be willing to own what it is that you really want and have the courage to own it and get more clarity around what you want that to look like in your daily life and why it's so important to you. Because that why is the only thing that's going to lead to that kind of hell yes commitment to get it done, to do it. And what are the things that are getting in the way of that? The things that are limiting what's possible in your life, and have the courage to acknowledge it and let it go and see so that you can see what else is possible. And use those questions. I mean, when you look at that thing that's tugging at your heart that feels impossible, dare to ask the question, what if it is possible? And what am I not seeing yet? And take one step, just one step towards what you really want and see what happens.
Activate the law of momentum. It'll change your life. Kat, I'm done. After what you just said, I mean, that is absolutely powerful stuff. And again, guys, I always, the purpose of us here and me having Kat and anyone is so that you can change your life and grab her insights and so forth. I'm going to give you guys, we're going to provide all of her links. She has such a body of work that I want you guys to get involved with her. And we're going to provide all of that stuff so that you can have access. Here is someone that has gone through some stuff. She has learned how to make the impossible possible, and she's teaching people how to do that. And many of you are looking at your life and you're saying, this whole thing is impossible. I have someone that can show you and guide you how to make that a possibility in your life. And she is here. And Kat, thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to try and bring her back again, Kat, if you don't mind, so we can continue just talking. I just want to introduce you next time and let's just rip and let's go and do something different and just let people exchange and hear things as you are talking to us. Thank you so much for this first visit here. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you, Ken.
It's an honor.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.